Right now, somewhere above you, there is a machine the size of a 20-story building flying at 900 kilometers per hour, carrying 400 people inside a metal tube, 13 kilometers above the ground. That machine has engines so powerful that each one alone could lift a fully loaded jumbo jet off the runway. It burns through fuel the way a Formula One car burns through rubber, except it does it for 17 hours straight without stopping. And it does all of this so smoothly that passengers inside are watching movies and eating warm meals, completely unaware of the physics-defying miracle happening around them. That machine is the Boeing 777, and most people have sat inside one without knowing a single thing about what it actually is. The Boeing 777 is not just a big airplane. It is the most successful long-haul twin-engine jet in aviation history. Twin engine means it only has two engines, one under each wing. That sounds normal until you realize that before the 777 existed, aviation rules said a twin-engine plane was not allowed to fly more than 60 minutes from the nearest airport. The logic was simple. If one engine fails over the ocean, you have 60 minutes to reach land before the situation becomes catastrophic. But Boeing looked at that rule and said they could build engines so reliable, so powerful, and so advanced that the rule needed to change. They were right. The 777's engines are so trustworthy that today it is certified to fly up to 330 minutes, 5.5 hours, on a single engine before it needs to reach an airport. This is called ETOPS 330. And the 777 was the first aircraft ever to receive that certification on its very first day of commercial service. No testing period. No gradual approval process. Day 1. Full certification. That had never happened before in the history of commercial aviation. The engines. The engines on the 777 deserve their own story because they are genuinely difficult to wrap your mind around. The GE 9115B, which powers the long-range versions of the 777, holds the world record for the most powerful jet engine ever built. Each engine produces 115,000 pounds of thrust. To give you a sense of what that means, the entire Apollo 11 Saturn V rocket, the one that sent humans to the moon, produced around 7.5 million pounds of thrust total across all 5 of its engines. The GE90 is obviously not in that league, but for a commercial aircraft engine sitting under the wing of a passenger plane, 115,000 pounds of thrust is an almost absurd number. The fan blade at the front of the engine, the spinning disc you see when you look at a jet engine, is 3.25 meters in diameter. That is wider than the entire cabin of a Boeing 737. You could park a car inside the engine opening and it would fit. The fan blades themselves are made from carbon fiber composite, not metal, because composite is lighter and stronger, and each blade is shaped using the same aerodynamic principles used to design aircraft wings. Those blades are not just spinning, they are generating lift inward, pulling air in with the same physics that keeps the plane in the sky. How it was built. The 777 was the first commercial aircraft in history to be designed entirely on computers with no physical mock-up. Before the 777, Boeing would build full-scale physical models of sections of the aircraft to check that parts fit together before production. With the 777, they created a completely digital version of every single component, over 3 million individual parts, in a system called CATIA, and they checked all the fits, joints, tolerances, and connections in the digital world before a single piece of metal was cut. This sounds routine today because every manufacturer now does it. In 1990, when Boeing started designing the 777, it was revolutionary. The result was that when Boeing assembled the first 777, the parts fit together on the very first attempt. No rework, no grinding, no emergency adjustments on the assembly floor. This was unheard of. Engineers from other manufacturers came to see it because they could not believe it had worked. Boeing also did something unusual during the design process. They invited 8 major airlines, including United Airlines, All Nippon Airways, British Airways, and others, to sit at the table during the design phase, not to advise from a distance, literally in the room, giving feedback on every detail. The result was a plane shaped not by engineers alone, but by the people who would actually operate it and the passengers who would sit in it. This working group was called the Working Together Program, and it produced over 1,500 design changes from what Boeing's engineers had originally planned. The size. The 777 is a large aircraft, but its size only becomes real when you start comparing it to things you know. The standard 777-200 is 63.7 meters long. That is longer than 10 double-decker buses parked end-to-end. The wingspan is 60.9 meters, meaning if you put the plane on a football field, the wingtips would reach past both end zones. The tail stands 18.5 meters off the ground, which is roughly the height of a 6-story building. The cabin is 6.2 meters wide, which means that in a typical 333 seating configuration, there are 9 seats across and still enough room left for 2 full aisles. Emirates, which operates more 777s than any other airline in the world, configured some of their 777s to carry 519 passengers in economy class alone. That is a small town's worth of people, airborne simultaneously in one aircraft. The range. The longest version ever built, the 777-200LR, where LR stands for long range, can fly 17,395 kilometers without stopping. To put that in perspective, the circumference of the Earth is roughly 40,075 kilometers. The 777-200LR can cover nearly half the circumference of the planet in a single flight. In November 2005, a 777-200LR flew from Hong Kong to London. But instead of flying west over Asia and the Middle East, it flew east, across the Pacific Ocean, across the United States, and across the Atlantic Ocean. It flew the long way around the world and still had fuel to spare. The flight covered 21,601 kilometers and took 22 hours and 42 minutes. It broke the world record for the longest non-stop commercial flight in history at the time. The plane landed in London from the wrong direction, and the aviation world took notice. The safety record. The 777 has one of the cleanest safety records of any wide-body jet in commercial aviation history. From 1995, when it entered service, through its first decade of operations, it had 0 fatal accidents. 0. In an era when air travel was expanding rapidly, routes were getting longer, and more airlines in more countries were operating the aircraft, the 777 flew for 10 straight years without a single passenger fatality. For an aircraft that was operating hundreds of flights every day across every ocean on Earth, that record is extraordinary. Aviation analysts point to the combination of the ETOPS certification standard, the engine reliability, and the redundant systems built into every critical function of the aircraft. The 777 has triple redundant hydraulic systems, meaning the hydraulics that control the flight surfaces have 3 completely independent backups. If one fails, a second takes over automatically. If the second fails, a third is still running. The plane is designed to keep flying even when multiple systems break simultaneously. The 777, nickname. Pilots and aviation enthusiasts call it the 777, and among the community of people who fly or work on aircraft for a living, the 777 has a reputation that borders on affection. Pilots who have flown many different aircraft types frequently describe the 777 as one of the most responsive and precise large jets ever built. For a plane this size, it handles with a sharpness that surprises people who expect something that big to feel heavy and sluggish. This is partly because the 777 uses fly-by-wire technology. There is no direct mechanical connection between the pilot's controls and the aircraft's control surfaces. When a pilot moves the control column, the input is converted into an electronic signal. A computer processes it, and then the computer moves the actual control surfaces. The computer also constantly monitors dozens of parameters and makes tiny adjustments many times per second to keep the aircraft stable and within safe limits. The pilot is flying the plane, but the computer is translating every input through a filter of physics and safety calculations before anything actually moves. Why it still matters. The 777 first flew in June 1994. That is over 30 years ago. The aircraft that was revolutionary in the mid-1990s is still in full production today, though now in an updated form called the 777X, which features folding wingtips and new engines. And it is still the backbone of long-haul aviation for the world's largest airlines. Emirates operates over 130 of them. Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airways, Cathay Pacific, and Air France all built their intercontinental networks around it. The reason it has lasted this long is that the original design was so fundamentally well executed that it did not need to be replaced, only updated. When Boeing designed it entirely on computers in 1990, when they built engines that were twice as powerful as anything that had come before, when they flew half the circumference of the Earth and broke records on a passenger aircraft, they were not building a plane for the 1990s. They were building a plane that would define what long-haul aviation looked like for the next 3 decades. Every time you board a long international flight and wonder why it feels so effortless, there is a good chance the answer is a 63-meter machine with engines wider than a car and a safety record that most aircraft manufacturers can only dream about.